Welcome to Inclusive Cyber, your front row seat to understand how a diverse mix of voices is not just necessary, but essential to protect our most sensitive computer networks and personal data. I'm your host, Danny Magallanes, and through my podcast, we shine the spotlight on the heroes and trailblazers from every corner of society who are redefining the diversity, equity, and inclusion frontier. Every episode is a step towards a cyber community that's as varied as it is united, where everyone has the keys to unlock their potential and the power to protect our digital world. Join us on this journey where every listen, every share, every dialogue inches us closer to this new reality. Max, welcome to Inclusive Cyber. How's it going today?
It's going pretty well. Just very busy week. Looking forward to tomorrow being Friday and almost the weekend. So work is very busy and sometimes it's quiet. But yeah, I'm looking forward to being on here.
I know we've worked together in the past, but definitely super excited to get into our conversation. And I think I told you right before hitting the record button that I wanted to cancel the show because just full disclosure, I had a tooth pulled. The retainer doesn't work, so I would have a lisp. So, at the end of the day,
all good. Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's not about me, but it's about how you were able to get into cybersecurity, discussing best practices, any mentors, just hearing your story. And that's what it's all about. People don't want to see my ugly face.
I mean, it's better to be genuine at least. So at least you're being genuine by saying that.
For sure. So with that being said, Max, let's just start at the very beginning. Can you just give a little bit background of where you're coming from and what you do in cybersecurity?
Sure. I'm a threat researcher, threat hunter, subject matter expert. I initially started in my career as an IR, an incident responder, and then got really into threat intelligence. I'm very fascinated by that. But actually, believe it or not, before I even started in cyber, I was a help desk. I definitely feel for everyone who's a help desk or desktop support. I work for a pretty great company right now, going on my fourth year as of yesterday. It's the first company I've stayed at for more than a year, which is pretty impressive for me. So finding a place that's a good fit. Cybersecurity in general, as you know, there's lots of disciplines, and I've slowly over the years figured out where my niche is. I enjoy the aspect of helping others, but I don't enjoy the part of being on call and doing shift work or in a skiff. I found where I want to be more of a researcher and driving ideas to be more proactive in a sense when it comes to how we secure our environments and how we think of cybersecurity.
I appreciate that background. And just to dig a little bit deeper, you said that you initially started in help desk. How did you initially get that position? Did you just have an intrinsic interest in tech in general?
When I was younger, I remember we had MS-DOS at home, and I was into like desktop publishing. Anyone remembers Treasure Math Storm or any of those really great games when you were a kid, and played Mega Race and all that stuff. And I was very into computers at a young age. I really liked computers. Both my parents were more in like the medical field, but I was very into computers, but I was also into criminal justice. It's ironic because originally I wanted to be a meteorologist. I'm very fascinated with meteorology. I am a storm photographer, but I have a learning disability math, so it made it pretty hard to do that. And realizing that I needed Calculus 1, Calculus 2, Calculus 3, I was like, all right, let's be realistic. I did theater for a few years when I was younger and also was studying in college, and then decided, okay, this is not my parents were like, you need to be realistic. And I'm like, okay, you're right. Because that's just how my family was. Very big on education and being realistic and making the right decisions. I got into help desk. I think I interned somewhere. I think it was Westat or somewhere when I was younger. And was good at helping people. Was the person my parents would always ask, or anyone I knew asked me to fix something for them, whether it was something broken. And as a help desk analyst, I got exposed to malware. I got exposed to antivirus. And I was like, okay, I mean, I'm good with computers. I don't want to be a help desk person forever. Then I slowly worked my way into engineering. So system engineer, network engineer, and the sysadmin. And I still didn't like it. I was not enjoying it. So I was like, okay, let me go see if I can get a job doing cybersecurity stuff. I wanted to do forensics for a long time. And my dad got me an internship with the Montgomery County Police Department where I live in their computer crime unit after I did a previous internship with one of their other police divisions, just doing non-computer stuff. And it was a really good experience because I learned really quickly. I didn't want to do computer forensics after all this stuff that they investigate. I'm like, nope, it's not all fraud cases. It's a lot of inappropriate, other really foul stuff you cannot live with. I did forensics in workplaces on IR and liked it, but I realized the amount of time and effort it takes sort of is just that it's very time consuming. And then I got into Intel and I'm like, okay, I like Intel. I don't like so much all of the writing parts of it, but I like the idea of exploring and being a detective almost, which is sort of why I want to take my love of criminal justice. The police, I looked at when I was younger, maybe considering going into the FBI as like an agent, and then realized, oh, my disability and other stuff might prevent me from doing it. And I was like, all right, let me see if I can find a job where I can actually do stuff. But my first cyber gig, I got to read, it was like a giant, I don't remember, you've seen like the giant folders when like an incident happens, like after an incident. That whole OPM thing that happened, one of the places I was working at was associated with it. I got to see the investigation from that back then, FireEye or Mandiant. And it was like, just awoke me, like sort of said, oh, I like this. I get very intense when it comes to cyber, and that's why I also don't know IR anymore, because I would spin people up or other people would spin me up. I got so into it and became very aware of how it is to be a defender that I was like, all right, I want to be thinking more from a proactive standpoint as not just a defender, but thinking from the offensive side as well, not as a red teamer, but purple teamer. Then found my role where I'm at now. I really like Intel. I'm more on the tactical side of Intel and have found my niche, right? I'm like, my expertise is in PRC, which is China and North Korea. Those are just an area that again, thing with autism is you get sort of focused on certain things, or you develop like an interest similar to Magic the Gathering, right? I'm like passionate about stuff. So yeah, that's sort of how it happened. I did a bunch of internships. I did a bunch of part-time jobs. I worked in the retail. So I have that. I know how it feels for everyone else who works in retail. I worked at a Starbucks when I was younger and just was like, all right, I need to make a living. I want to do something good. And I want to help the greater good. That was my goal in life, to do good. Hence why, I'm a trained storm star for the National Weather Service. If I see a, storm, like bad weather, flooding, tornadoes, stuff like that, report it to them so they can warn others. I've always wanted to be that sort of, not hero, but like someone who can actually do good for others. It's just like a mitzvah, which is a Yiddish term that my parents would use a lot. So right now I'm trying to build an ERG, an employee relation group for neurodiversity in the group I'm in now in my company. So I'm hoping that's going to happen as well.
I appreciate just the overall depth and breadth of your background, and especially your trajectory and the different job roles that you had. You said that you're in retail, you were dabbing into theater, into drama. And I think we really need to understand, I think those are valuable skill sets, because another thing that tells me you're curious, right? I would argue a lot of people in our profession are not curious. Why is this happening? Why are the adversaries gaining access to our network? I really love that background. The initial role that you had gave you different opportunities to test other ones. You said that you really wanted to get into forensics. Dabbing into different various aspects of cybersecurity, I think we really need to expose more of our colleagues and our peers and even new people trying to come in, because they might have it in their mindset to say, I want to be GRC, I want to be Intel, I want to be forensics. But until they get exposed to that, it's going to be a different thing, right?
I also think like when you're coming into cybersecurity, you just don't come in. Like a lot of people expect you come in and you make 6 figures. And I think that's a common misconception, at least because I had a job where I made that and it was not a good fit, and I left that job very quickly, it was mutually bad fit. And I think that's why it's also important when you're in cyber to have a tech background, because if you come in with already a tech background and then come into cyber, that's going to put you miles ahead of anyone else, because you have that background, you've explored different areas, like being able to deal with customers is a piece that I think is very important. Having customer service abilities. When you're in IR or you're in Intel, you have to talk to audiences. Being able to communicate and write effectively is another thing that I think I've had people like interns who've said, oh, I don't want to write this. And I'm like, well, there's documentation. And one of the things I'm big on, at least something that has helped me in my career, is I'm very big on documentation and structure. If I have a team of people that I'm managing, I want them to be able to easily follow a workflow. And if not, let me know, hey, what's wrong with the workflow so I can help them tweak it. And I think that's not all of cybersecurity and all of any career, right? Any path you choose is going to be fun and games. There's definitely going to be times where you're going to have to do stuff that you don't want to do. Like I am on a small team right now and I delve into other things. Like I work with the SIM team and delve into things with work with compliance. I hate compliance for the record, but I want to grow in my career as into a manager. And one of the things when you're on a small team or you're in a small company, you sometimes have to wear a lot of hats. And I'll be honest, there have been times I've said absolutely not, but I haven't, because of those decisions I've made to say that, I've not gotten further. But now I'm like, as an adult, I'm realizing after being somewhere now, I need to take a step and start being a leader and not just a follower. That's a common thing I tell people. If you want to get into the field, in the company I work for, the newer people, they'll be like, how do I get into threat hunting? You want to study, get familiar with internals, understand operating systems, understand how they work, understand processes, maybe have some IR experience like DFIR. I think incident response is probably one of the best stepping stones for anyone who wants to go into threat hunting or threat research, because you get a hands-on approach to like how things happen from the defender side. If you think about it, it's like being a detective. When you're in cybersecurity, you're either putting things together or you're taking things apart.
You beat me to the punch, because one question I was going to follow up was, when people come to you and say, hey, how do I get into cybersecurity? What routes? And not to say that when people come to us and ask us that they're going to follow exactly some of the recommendations that you already mentioned. The SOC, you are going to see the unglorious side of cybersecurity, right?
Your eyes on glass to start with, and you work your way
Right.
into the real, when you're on the front lines of the trenches, when you're actually looking at entire, like doing forensics. That's in the trenches. When you're doing forensics, or you're actually honest versus looking at logs or looking at alerts.
Yeah.
Gotta start somewhere. Yeah.
Or doing compliance. There's a lot of folks that have been reaching out to me that they want to be in GRC. I'm like, oh, how boring. Obviously, I try to help them out. I don't want to be judgmental.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, for me personally, yeah.
I will say one thing. So a lot of people ask me like what certs they get. And I'll be upfront. I don't have any certs, which should tell you something about my experience and how successful I've been. I find real world experience, and don't get me wrong, there's going to be very much various other people who are going to disagree with this completely. But I've also had managers in my career and in my past that have told me they care more about what I know and my abilities than a piece of paper. And everyone's different, but I will say if I'm hiring someone or if I'm going to bring people on my project, on my team, and say I'm managing a team, I care about curiosity and passion, or what I call passion. I want someone who's passionate and actually wants to learn and wants to grow in cyber. It's a career, not a job. Like, I don't want to have someone on my project or my team that just thinks of it as a job. When you come into this company that we're at, it's a career. I'm at a point in my life where it's a career for me. And I want equally passionate people. And I've had equally passionate people, one of which was an intern. And he's doing great. He's on the company now. But he did everything I asked him to do. He went above and beyond. And the other person was like, I don't want to write. And I'm like, okay, well, go deal with IR then. Work with the IR team, because I need help with doing this because I'm just one person. I'm still in touch with him. I'm one of his mentors. I will say certs in general, even education, it really makes a difference when you have real world experience in cybersecurity, I think. Like having that experience of what it's like. Both private, public, doesn't matter.
So I agree with you, Max, 110%. I think certifications are way overrated. From an educational perspective, if you don't know the material, then I'm all up for it. But they create barriers. They're costly. And especially if you're new into cybersecurity, you're not going to have the money for that. The disconnect is, okay, you and I, leaders in cybersecurity, are saying to the world, hey, certifications don't matter. Okay, check. But then how do you get that real world experience?
Internships are one very good way. Applying for, whether it's if you're new and you're in college and you're coming out of college, get an unpaid or paid internship. I know FBI, all these different federal agencies have internship programs. Private companies have internship programs. That's another thing, having a network. I think that's a big thing that, just like with podcasting, you have to build a brand. And when you're trying to build yourself, your capability, where you want to go with your career, you have to network with people, whether that's through jobs you've had, whether that's people you follow on Twitter or on other social media networks. You have to build like that rapport, because a lot of the people in this field are neurodiverse and they aren't going to just directly reach out to you. I've experienced that. I'm not one of those people who, if somebody just randomly like reaches out, expects me to just reach out to them. especially the people who are in this red team, blue team side. They are very much very introverted. I'm just saying it's a common thing in the cyber field that neurodiversity is everywhere. It's just a very misunderstood. Certs are not bad, like you said. I think there are certain certs that are very valuable and very respected, like CISSP. As painful as that cert is, because I've considered getting it, I might still get it. I'm not sure. The OSCP for pen testing, which is again a live lab based. I find those tend to be better because they are taking real world and they're throwing you in it, versus something like, I don't know, CEH versus OSCP. CEH is good, but I think it's going to be more valuable if you have the real world, like the experience doing it, right? Versus a checkbox. The CompTIA stuff's great for new people. I 100% embrace the CompTIA stuff. I think Secure Plus, A Plus if you're doing like mechanical type stuff with computers. Network Plus is really good. I'd say if you college, you do something different than cyber, then taking those courses or taking a boot camp might be good. Even if you don't get the cert, you get more maybe perspective. And there's plenty of things online, free labs, like AIs everywhere, Hack the Box and Try Hack Me. The internet is full of information that we can also just gather without even having a cert. So Google's your friend.
Yes, or YouTube
exactly.
University is another one.
Yep.
That I always
really
recommend.
Yeah.
Max, great insight. I appreciate. We could definitely talk for hours on,
for sure.
this particular topic. But before we mention that, I know one of the meat or the meatier part of our interview here is about neurodiversity, but I want to still put that in on hold for just a second. So one thing I really wanted to talk to you about is mentorships. Did you have them when you first started at working the help desk? And if you did, and then how did you engage? Or was there an opportunity where there was some type of mentorship program already established and you were kind of given a mentor? Just curious, because I get a lot of questions about another thing that you said about networking. Networking is key in our industry, just reaching out. Because the worst thing that will happen if you don't reach out, nothing.
Nothing will happen.
Right?
You'll just lose out potentially on opportunities.
Right.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I'd love to hear your perspective when it comes to if you had any mentors when you first started in cyber.
Yeah. So I had a mentor actually when on my first cyber gig. He's passed away, obviously. He was sort of that guy that really got me into cyber, and I asked him what could I do. When I was there, I was a junior cybersecurity engineer, so I was managing the FireEye appliance, the Mirror appliance, Mandiant Mirror appliance, all the different IDS, IPS stuff, so I got very familiar with that. He had a background, I believe, I'm trying to remember what agency he worked for, but he was like a very supportive person to me. Actually, my PL that I have on my company reminds me very much of him, to believe it or not. He was tough with me because obviously, like I said, my disability caused me to do things like interactions both on a social level but also things that are obviously outbursts, stuff like that. But he really guided me and let me jump in and take the lead on IR, which was pretty cool. I built a relationship with one of the government employees. I sort of went outside my comfort zone. He was a really nice guy. Like, he's really down to earth, and he gave me a chance. I kept in touch with my manager prior to obviously what happened, being deceased and everything. He gave me recommendations when I left the company. Where should I go in my career? I left the company originally to go foresee that dream six-figure job, which ended up not working out. I will say startups are punishing to people, especially if you're not, like, if you're on, for me at least, being neurodiverse. I had another situation where I worked then for MSSP, and one of my colleagues, Brian, he more or less was like, he had a red team social engineering background. He worked for a company called Social Engineer. He sort of has given me guidance in the past when I asked him, like, hey, should I take this other job? He's actually one of the people who convinced me to turn down a role with a big company, which was good. He said you should stay where you are and like keep working there. One of the concerns, anxieties I had was how I would fit in there. I've heard some stories from friends who work there that, or other friends that are not working there anymore. I have made the right decision not doing that. My most recent job before I came to the company I'm at now, my friend Ben, they moved away. He was very supportive of me, like considering how much I was being bullied in that company. It was a DIB company, Defense Industrial Base. I kept in touch with him. He went to go work at Microsoft, which is awesome, but they let him go. And I'm like, he's just like the company, the big contractor, let him go. And I was like, well, that's crappy. And I felt in general how I was treated there. I never wanted to be anywhere again like that large defense contractor. I got let go because I was having issues with my coworkers and stuff. And that was where I did Intel and was doing Hunt and got really into MITRE ATT&CK, very deep into it. But my friend Ben, like I still talk to him and his wife. We actually hung out, did play board games with them. So it was like not just a work relationship, it was also like a friendship. So that was interesting because I had not had many situations where I built friendships within my career. But he's also advised me, like he told me, like, oh yeah, you should apply to this, or these are some good skills to have. He's been in the field a long time, longer than me probably, and he
Mhm.
had some good insight. And I've taken that insight. And then, of course, I've had mentors on where I'm at now. Having a mentor that left the company to go work at a different company was unfortunate, but he taught me everything I know now about threat hunting and has ingrained me to continue his work that he was working on. Chris was always very good guy, really helped me out and put up with me and how talkative I was and how much I needed help when I came on. Now I have another person who I've worked with for over that's around the same time and was there when he was there, and he's taken over and just been a very supportive element to me, both as my mentor, but also from a professional standpoint, like helping me get my foot in the door, talk to other senior managers, put myself in the right role. And he's been just integral for me growing to where I'm at, trying to get to a manager level, like very much taking the time, even though he's very busy, and putting that time to help me, which I like. I really respect that and admire that.
A couple of things that really stand out, and
Mm-hmm.
just some of the themes that I was able to extract on that.
Yeah.
Leaders that are sympathetic, that are giving back and helping their people grow. And they might not be under them or work for them,
Right.
but just taking that time to build up people so they can learn and grow. So I definitely love that. And the other thing was building your network. I mentioned it before. The worst thing that can happen if you don't reach out to folks is nothing,
Nothing.
right?
And
Nothing.
if you do
So,
reach out, they might say nobody, they might not respond, but at the end of the day, you at least were due diligent and persistent, which is the key.
right. That really resonates with me when you have empathetic leaders. And a leader, it's not about titles, right? It's about somebody who just wants to give back and helping people, right? Because at the end of the day, no matter what profession, no matter what we're doing, we're all going to need help in one way or another throughout our lives. There's no need to be worried, oh, this person doesn't reach out or they don't respond. Just do it. You'll be surprised, because one of the finite things in this world is time. We cannot expand the 24-hour day, right?
I was going to point that out, that I think for me, time is money to me. Those headhunters that waste my time telling me they have a job role, I'm like, I don't have time for this. I have
Right.
time for someone who actually has something to say that matters. That's not trying to be dismissive, but that's also probably how people think on LinkedIn, right? When you message somebody, if you're not going to take the time to think it out and just say, hey, blah, 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 like something very not thought out, right? And you don't
Mhm.
know them, think, what makes you think they're going to respond? You have to be thought out and make it worth their time.
And it has to be kind of a symbiotic relation. It's
Yep.
helping each other out, and not, I want something for you and I'm not going to give you anything.
Not transactional. Yeah,
right.
correct. Yeah.
Definitely love this conversation, and I appreciate your background on mentors and how vital they are for our careers. I've had mentors as well that have helped me along the way. But let's transition to neurodiversity. So, just to set the stage, and I know we talked about this before, for me, neurodiversity, I first became familiar with that term or introduced to that term early last year when I went to a conference here in Denver. And I reached out to the speaker and we had a great conversation. It was about just inclusion and diversity within the workspace, and they mentioned different perspectives. So, with that being said, for our audience, if you would like to share your experience, just educating all of us when it comes to neurodiversity.
Sure. So neurodiversity comes in a spectrum. So there's various types. I suffer from two of them. I'm both ADHD, which formerly was ADD, and then AD with hyperactivity disorder. And I'm also autistic, on the autistic spectrum. Part of what these things do is they affect, one, how we communicate. They affect how we process things, how we do day-to-day, our day-to-day jobs or lives. Everybody can range from both. There can be nonverbal autism. You can have people who are low functioning autism. You can have high functioning. I consider myself a high functioning person on the spectrum. It wasn't always like that, but one of the biggest things I'd say that has been a struggle for me is getting a company that's going to embrace me and let me speak my mind and be myself and let me build my credibility, but also treat me like a peer. And one of the things I've worked on is I've been in companies where people were like the hero mentality and very bold, very much like, I'm a bully. I was here first. I'm going to be a jerk to you. I've had that experience with some people. One of the net defense contract I worked for, that one of the guys I worked with, he was just a complete bully to me and a complete jerk. And I got very angry with him. He was really not nice. And in general, I've experienced that in other places also. Part of that is because I communicate differently, probably more sensitive than some people about things. I talk a lot. I have various passions and I sometimes get off track or say things without thinking, so I don't filter everything out. Again, that's part of just the whole spectrum. I tend to stick with things and dig into them deeper. One benefit of being on the spectrum, being autistic spectrum, is being able to do analysis. I'm very focused when I'm focused on something. But one of the negative things is you can easily be taken off focus because I have the ADHD element as well. And some people also on the spectrum tend to be easily find themselves unfocused very easily. So can't multitask. That's why structure has been a big thing for me, right? Having structure. I did doors when I was in college, which is a rehabilitation capability, which I highly recommend people if they're interested, especially people in the DC area. They'll help you with accommodations, job, getting you in the right direction. Because I went to community college. I didn't go to a four-year college immediately. Mainly because, again, the neurodiversity, I don't know how I would socialize. I didn't think I'd fit in. And that's really what it is. Finding a place where you feel comfortable, more or less somewhere where I felt like I could say who I am and be upfront about it without feeling judged. And I think that's the fear people have. You make yourself very vulnerable when you talk about this stuff, obviously, to people. So I was bullied a lot when I was younger and never knew why it was. As an adult, I finally came to terms. This is why I'm not able to hold a job. This is why I'm having trouble with relationships. I'm married now and have a job I've been at for 4 years exactly now. I faced my demons, is what I call them, more or less, because these are things that I kept denying and not coming to terms with, and then realized, wait a minute, something's up, because I'm very smart. I'm very on top of things. I'm very persistent. But people get agitated with me so much. That's where subject matter expertise is so great, because if you have this like focus, this drive, this passion, which is what happened, like I mentioned, like magic, meteorology, computers, etc. I have different passions, right? And that's another thing about people on the spectrum, especially autism, which is where I identify with, which is very hard to say because I used to think it was bad to be different. And I don't even know what it's like to be normal. I mean, never did, never will. This is just sort of who I am, right? So I'm facing my own me. Yeah.
I appreciate you discussing this and, like you mentioned, being vulnerable. And
Yes.
A lot of us, myself included, don't want to be vulnerable for whatever reason, because we think that's a negative attribute for us as
How we're
people,
conditioned as humans. Yeah.
Right. I think being vulnerable lets you shed off any kind of imposter phenomenon that you might
Right.
have. And then two, this is who I am. Now, whether you accept me or not, that's not on me. That's
not my
them.
problem. So I tell you all, you don't want to accept me, then you're lost. There's plenty of people who will accept me. So
I definitely love that. Thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable here in front of
the world, probably in front of people who know me and probably people who don't know me. So yeah.
I wish the world would start watching the show. I think there's a lot of valuable content that my guests bring up there. So a couple of things that I forgot to mention that you mentioned it here about structure, about SOPs, right?
Yeah.
So that's another thing that I really admired, that you wanted to create structure. And especially for new people coming in, is there an SOP to learn from? Otherwise, then that manager has to be there supporting you. And if they're not, then setting you up for failure. So that's another thing that I really wanted to comment on. And then the other thing is the fear and the vulnerability that you mentioned. So again, thank you for sharing that. From my perspective, it's about creating a safe environment. There's this book, Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last. And when I read that book, that was about 6 or 7 years ago, I was in a very ugly environment at work. But that book really, really resonated with me on how to be a good leader. You need to create a safe environment where everybody, if they want to speak up, has that opportunity without any pushback, any fear, any bullying, like you mentioned there, because at the end of the day, everybody's bringing in their own unique perspectives and
Hmm.
value. No
Right.
matter what your background, no matter what gender, etc. At the end of the day, just being kind to one another and just supporting one another. So one question to you,
Hmm.
that what would you want leaders to really understand about neurodiversity and how they can support you and probably millions of other people that are scared and fearful of coming out and saying, hey, I don't want to mention this because now I'm going to be viewed differently. I might be ostracized. I might
Yeah.
be fired, worst case scenario. So, what would
Well,
you tell?
yeah, I was going to say the firing thing is most companies have a non-zero retaliation policy, but it does happen. I agree, especially in like
Yeah,
retail and some of these other places. So,
yeah.
but yeah, go ahead. Sorry to be done. Yep.
You're good. What would you want leaders to really understand and how to support you so you can be your authentic self at work and help you be successful?
I think this will apply to it will vary, but I think if you're concerned and you want your manager to support you and help you grow, I think it's good to have a conversation with them. They should ask you, hey, like each person on the team, what is your learning style? Like, how do you learn? One of the things I do is I'll ask, do you prefer text? Do you prefer email? Can we set up a one-on-one? The company I'm at, it's a very open hierarchy. That's the other thing, which I really like. Some companies, you don't talk to C-level ever. This is one of those opportunities where, at least with managers, if you outline to them, I struggle with so-and-so, like you have to trust at least that your manager is going to like give them benefit of the doubt. And
Mhm.
if they can't, the other option you can do is you can go to your HR and you can talk to them about reasonable accommodations. Most companies offer that. And then what they'll do is they'll sit down with your manager or leader. They'll work with them and try and make it because they want you to be successful at a company. They don't just want you to like flounder. And I'm not saying I wish every company did this, but the companies that do this, it's good. But you just have to be willing to reach out to those resources. You can't expect things to come to you. And at some point, it may feel, like you said, vulnerable by going and asking like for help. Asking for help is one of the struggles a lot of people have within cyber and within just in general. And going to the right people and thinking everything's just going to come about on its own, because what could happen is your boss doesn't understand it at all and you don't want to explain to them, and they put you on a pip because they see you're doing not well or you're being disruptive or interrupting. And that has happened to me, for example. And I've
Mhm.
asked for accommodations. They're like, reasonable accommodations, like when you go to the hospital. I'm like, what? No, like reasonable accommodate. I think the key is don't be afraid to ask for help. Managers in general should go through some sort of sensitivity training when it comes to neurodiversity. I think it's something that I'm hoping is going to happen. I've come to you and I've come to the other person in the past when I worked with you and told you about myself and some of my struggles, because I was struggling on a project I was on. My manager didn't understand, and I was pretty clear with her, and she kept thinking I'm just being a jerk and not doing the work and all this. I got myself out of that situation, which was good, by having you and the other individuals as mentors to help me out of that situation. But yeah, like nothing will come to you. Like you have to go out there and do it. But I also think for anyone who's a manager or a leader, it's very important that you understand that not everybody's the same. Not everybody is super social and may take a joke to be funny. Same with addressing someone. They might prefer, people call me Max. Some people call me Maxwell. And I'm like, for Max. I think that's important. Ask somebody on your team that you're managing, how do you prefer to communicate? I know that's a lot to ask, but I think you do better as an organization and in your project if your employees are happy and they feel supported. And I think that's a big piece, that you supporting them means going to bat for them, advocating for them, knowing even if they do have disability or something that's like debilitating or something that even makes them very hard to work with them, that you're there to be an advocate for them or at least help them in the right direction. Even if it's not, it's finding a different role that's going to fit them better. But at the same time, the individual who has the struggles, you need to not be afraid and trust that they have your best interest, especially if you've been at a company for a long time and you like the culture, you like the people. If somebody dismisses you or discriminates you, that's a whole other issue, but it's not your fault. That's the fact the person is ignorant and doesn't understand in that case. But they don't understand because they've never asked. So that's why I think it's important for leaders to also ask. If something's going bad on a team or a project and they're not doing what you're expecting, ask them, say, hey, is something going on? But do it in a, like you said, in a sympathetic way. Don't do it in, hey, why aren't you doing the job, right? Don't micromanage people. That's worked for me, at least. You only get help if you ask for it. You're not going to get help. And this is to people who are neurodiverse. You have to ask, not be afraid.
Thank you, Max, for shedding insight, at least educating me. Some of the key takeaways that I got is just being proactive, communicating to your leaders, and hopefully your leaders will have a growth mindset to say, hey, I'm not really too familiar with this. Let me educate myself. And the training for leaders and managers is something that a lot of companies do already, but I think I would argue there should be more, right?
It could be done better. In general, I think the different forms of neurodiverse. So autism is one of the big ones, obviously. I'm not discounting any of the other ones, but that's where I'm coming from. There's just overall how you interact with also people on the team. The manager should be aware of that and conduce a positive environment and not a combative environment. Like, you should all be collaborating and working together. And like you said about proactive, I feel like that's like my mantra now at this point, because I'm all about proactive cybersecurity. And I'm also a very proactive person in general. So maybe that's a match made in heaven. Another example that's not neurodiverse. If you want to, you should also be open to giving someone a chance. If someone says they want to try something different, and if they're neurodiverse, give them that opportunity, right? Then what that does is that says they trust you, and you to build credibility for yourself as well.
No, just great insight. And the key thing is that trust, right? Because without it, no mission, no work is going to get done.
Like you had said previous, by the way, about if you don't message someone, nothing happens.
Yeah.
Same thing. If you don't ask for help, nothing happens, and potentially it could be negative.
I really appreciate this interview, you sharing your entry into cybersecurity, your neurodiverse perspective, and just educating me and hopefully educating the audience listening to podcast format, audio format, or on YouTube. I love books. I'm in the middle of 15 different books. I pilfered this from another podcast that I listen to. They always ask, what books are you reading? So that's what I always ask my guests at the very end. What book or books have you recently read or currently reading that you'd like to share with the audience?
Ironically, I'm not a huge reader. I used to be, but college made me not like reading as much. But I will say the last book I finished was Looking Up, which is a storm chaser story by Matthew Capucci. He works closely with Capital Weather Gang. The book was really good, and it's a narrative of his life in storm chasing and getting into the field and how he got to where he was. And I liked that a lot. And the other book I started reading, Click Here and Everyone Dies, which is essentially about the idea of OT, operational technology. And it's basically talking about bioprinters, for example, how if the wrong person gets access, they can potentially print a virus, which is not outside the realm of possibilities. The whole idea of we live in this world where we're connected by technology. And one of the biggest things we're adding more into our technology is artificial intelligence, machine learning, and even automation or smart features. It's a good book from what I've read. There's also Sandworm, which I need to read, which I haven't read yet. But I would say one of my favorite books, Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. Really like his stuff. It's historic history along with crime, which is awesome. So Devil in the White City is obviously about Chicago's World's Fair taking place, and then the serial killer that's literally killing people in behind the architecture of the World's Fair, which is cool because they're talking so much about the World's Fair and the architecture and like how it was built. And then you also have this separate side story. And that's why I like his stuff, because he does a really good job with it. He did another one on the Lusitania, which is really cool. He did one about Nazi Germany was becoming a thing, like this American family that was living there. And suddenly everything around them is just changing. In the Garden of Beasts, I think is what it's called, if I remember off the top of my head. But yeah, I tend to like nonfiction. I know you say like maybe a lot of people won't watch, but I probably will share this with my LinkedIn so that way I get more people interested in it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you advertising, and we're all in now the social media platforms. I appreciate all the books. I appreciate your time, Max. Super educational. Again, I'd love to have you back on the show, but thank you for being an inclusive cyber, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to be able to do this. This is awesome. This is definitely a change for me, but I'm really happy I got to do it. Thank you.